My second stretch along the Silk Road starts from Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia. From the capital, route south, crossing the 700 kilometers into the Gobi Desert, and then, once in China, wheels in the direction of Beijing. From Beijing then, one last romp to the China Sea, a total of 2,000 kilometers. Marco Polo crossed the desert on a camel, Giacomo Pirozzi on a motorcycle, Reinhold Messner by walking. I will use the locomotive, but not this one, rather this one, without the wagons. And it is precisely a locomotive that wakes me up for the departure. I begin in the morning with a series of well-known gestures, repeated hundreds of times, and which have now become a classic routine before embarking on any journey. It is not cold, even though we are on a plateau over 1,000 meters. But it is better to repair the mouth, because here, when the wind blows, that is every day, dust and sand rises. In the nothingness, there is only one road. Impossible to go wrong. Maps or GPS here are completely useless. Just keep the wheels on the track. We are at high altitude, but it's still 95 degrees Fahrenheit, so hydrating well is absolutely essential. Paraphrasing Robert De Niro, there are 3 ways to cross the desert: the right one, the wrong one, and mine. Little luggage, lots of water, head down, and pedal. Is a long way to the border, and one needs to be well motivated, especially when you are alone. And when motivation wanes, it is necessary to find a way to find it again, whatever it takes. For long stretches, the railroad skirts the roadway and remains the only evidence of human presence. As for traffic, I can say that it is practically non-existent. Along the desert are few population centers, generally tiny villages, where the Mongols continue to keep alive their traditions as a nomadic population. In fact, even if you see houses, the Mongol never fails to sleep in his yurt. Every house has at least one, either nearby or in the yard, a tradition that refuses to die. In these villages, one has the rare opportunity to familiarize with the locals and, the far more important one, to take provisions and especially water, which in these parts is a rare and precious commodity. Qoya is one of 2 towns in this part of the desert. Very small, to be honest. It has a little more than 7,000 inhabitants, but among these there are also a few kids eager to take a selfie with me. In Station Square stands the monument to the only Mongolian astronaut with an unpronounceable name. Today a lunch awaits me in the city's only restaurant. The menu is in Cyrillic, but it matters little. There is only mutton available in its various culinary elaborations: stew, boiled, roast, and as a side dish, the inevitable of noodles. After cordial pleasantries with the shepherd, I resume my way to the desert, where the few puddles of standing water are literally stormed by cattle. I was talking about water at the beginning. Well, never be without it. In this desert, you really risk it, and running out of water can be a problem that should not be underestimated.
I ran out of giga. Damn it, I ran out of giga.
In the most critical moments, it becomes essential to remember the survival techniques learned from the Bushmen in the Kalahari, the Aborigines in the Simpson Desert, and the Bedouins in the Sahara, and rely on experience.
However, I feel like giving a piece of advice. The dowsing rod is a serious item. Buy it in the right places.
The last Mongolian village, that of Zaminyud, lies in close proximity to the border with China, at the end of this stretch of asphalt. But the border cannot be crossed either on foot or by bike, so an interminable number of uaz waits for customers to take them over the bars. After a long negotiation, I find a ride for the following morning. It's just too bad that, just below my room, nice bricklayers decide that the best time to work and use the drill is precisely during the night. So given noise, I'm going to treat myself to an evening of distractions in the only nightclub in town, the karaoke one. But I guess the noise of the drill was better though. Loaded the luggage onto a van, I crossed the border and changed the beer cap on the fork to that of a Chinese beer. Just across the border is the town of Ehrenhut. I went from the least populated country in the world to the most populated. Here everything is different. Huge cities with huge streets, where instead of old Russian jeeps are wonderful luxury cars. It is a sign of an impressive economic turnaround in the country. The old bikes of yesteryear have been replaced by electric scooters, with which the city is literally overrun. Even the alphabet has changed. No longer the incomprehensible Cyrillic, but the indecipherable ideograms. For me, it makes little difference. Both are equally unfamiliar and incomprehensible to me, and the language difficulties remain the same on both sides of the border.
Non capisco bene, sì. Io non ti capisco. Mongolia, Russo. Non capisco.
The language barrier, however, does not prevent my host from letting me know that in the back room he runs a small guest house.
Stanza con lavandino. 2 lavandini. Doppi bagni.
Chinese Inner Mongolia, for a long stretch, retains the characteristics of the Gobi Desert. It is a barren terrain, rich only in brushwood, and with small towns punting in a deserted heath. To get supplies, I sometimes have to find curious stores placed in places almost impossible to find. And finally, I meet a fellow cyclist wearing the ever-present mask. It always made me smile to see many Orientals wearing a face mask, but here its use is certainly justified, since a long series of factories discharge tons of coal dust into the air and onto the road, as you can clearly see from my leg once the sock is taken off. It's raining on the way to Beijing, but it is better this way, because the atmosphere was becoming unbreathable. And with the arrival of the rain, the air gets clean. Too bad only that the tons of coal particles suspended in the air fall to the ground, forming puddles of disconcertingly dark color. Passing with the wheels on the water It is thrown on the bicycle, then on the gears, on the brakes, on the clothes and shoes. It is the first time that after a downpour besides wet, I find myself sweaty. A good jet wash should be enough for the bike. For me, I foresee a long stay in the shower at the hotel, but for clothes, I have the impression that the matter will be longer and more challenging.
E cosa abbiamo qua? I due calzini. Oggi abbiamo avuto una giornata fangosa.
But every cloud has a silver lining. And just out of China's inner Mongolia, along with the good weather, appears a long series of cultivated fields, and sweltering humid heat also returns. And so, water consumption soars. After 1,500 kilometers, I finally arrive in Beijing and at its now legendary Tiananmen Square, where I arrive on a beautiful sunny day. Leaning my bike against the barriers, I take a selfie in front of the entrance to the Forbidden City, where towers the portrait of Mao Zedong. For 500 years, the city was forbidden access, but today, 80,000 people queue interminably every day to see the palace, made famous by director Bertolucci, and which for centuries was the home of the emperor. Beijing today is a metropolis, with a population of 20 million, with huge boulevards and traffic from hell. There are thousands of bike-share bikes and a skyline formed by hundreds of tall skyscrapers. The old Beijing, with rickshaws and narrow alleys, is only a memory that survives in a small neighborhood, frequented now only by tourists. Everything has changed. Even Tai Chi has been replaced in the parks with local disco music. I abandoned the chaos in Beijing by directing my wheels north to the small village of Jiangku, because here there is a section of the Great Wall of China closed to the public, unrestored, and isolated from the crowds of tourists. And it is an excellent choice because after a strenuous walk of a few hours through the woods, I can enjoy in total solitude the magnificence of this work, which a legend says is the only one visible from space. 2,000 years of history and a massive wall that history teaches never served any purpose. These are my last kilometers along the Silk Road. My destination is just over 300 kilometers away. I try to avoid the main roads, taking detours that lead me through small rural towns, where China still retains a more traditional aspect, as if life had stopped a few centuries ago. They are kilometers without difficulty. I could almost call them a defatigue, after the long run, which began in faraway Mongolia. I am in no hurry. I still have a few days left to spend in China. The last leg takes me to the shores of the China Sea at the resort of Qinhuangdao, where the Great Wall, after an interminable journey, plunges into the sea. The last bastion of the Great Wall of China began more than 2,000 years ago under the Qin dynasty, and 6,300 kilometers long, faces the sea. It is amazing to think that it is to the shortest dynasty in China's history lasting only 15 years, that we owe the works that most characterize this country, the Great Wall and the imposing army of 8,000 terracotta warriors intended to protect the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. And it is to that last bastion, which has stood on guard, waiting for an invader from the sea for over 20 centuries, that I lean the steel frame of my bike. The ancient Silk Road ends here, and here also ends my journey.